Track 2 diplomacy between India and Pakistan has shifted gears post Operation Sindoor, with more structured discussions focused on conflict management rather than dispute resolution, which has been the cornerstone of such dialogues for decades. Hello and welcome to The Print. My name is Keshav Padmanabhan, and I will explain how Track 2 diplomacy between India and Pakistan has changed in recent years. At least 3 rounds of Track 2 dialogues have been held between delegations from the two sides since May 2025, sources in the know have told The Print. These include a couple in West Asian nations in the last 6 months, as well as an older dialogue format in a capital city to India's east. At least 2 more Track 2 dialogues are scheduled for later this year. Track 2 diplomacy differs from official government to government exchanges. Long before the term was coined in the 1980s, citizens had led efforts to exchange communication between adversarial nations. These efforts have sometimes had government sanction, and sometimes they may not have. It was Joseph Montville, a Foreign Service officer in the US, who coined the term Track 2 diplomacy, describing it as an unofficial, informal interaction between members of adversary groups or nations, which aims to develop strategies, influence public opinion, and organize human and material resources in a way that may help resolve their conflict. Track 2 diplomacy in no way is a substitute for official diplomatic exchanges between governments. However, Track 2 diplomacy assists governments by carrying communications and potential solutions for issues that leaders may publicly oppose. Ties between the US and Russia, for example, Israel and Palestine, and India and Pakistan are some of those that have a long legacy of Track 2 dialogues. One of India and Pakistan's oldest continuous Track 2 dialogue formats began immediately after the 26/11 terrorist attacks in 2008. Some of the more official dialogues have government backing, with delegations reporting the discussion takeaways to the government before and after the meeting with the opposing delegation. Track 2 diplomacy allows governments to understand what their adversaries are thinking, and also potentially find some breakthroughs in ongoing disputes. However, while in the past India-Pakistan Track 2 dialogues involved various individuals, in recent years, the Pakistani army has taken a more formal control over the process, including selecting attendees and messages that their delegations carry to these dialogues. The India-Pakistan Track 2 network now works entirely within the framework of existing political realities. It is not driven by the objective of conflict resolution, but rather seeks conflict management. One attendee of a recent Track 2 dialogue informed The Print. This was not always the case. More than a dozen dialogue formats have existed for years between New Delhi and Islamabad to maintain informal channels of communication. A few have government sanction, from which both sides receive reports on the negotiations themselves to understand the other's thinking. However, since Operation Sindoor, the dialogues have generally focused on conflict management and prevention of escalation, while other pending issues such as Jammu and Kashmir and the Indus Waters Treaty, both of which have political ramifications, have moved lower on the agenda. Given the Pakistani army's own control of the Pakistani state, the mechanism also acts as both a sounding board and a courier for New Delhi to be aware of the adversary's thinking. It is this benefit which Track 2 meetings bring to the government, which remains aware of them but is not involved in them. Another person who has been involved in these processes for a little over half a decade told The Print. The most recent meeting of eminent personalities, including former diplomats and military officers from both countries, was held on 2nd February this year for 2 days in the Qatari capital of Doha, where a number of subjects were discussed. While the dialogue did have a military presence in both delegations, there were more diplomats and other officers. An earlier Track 2 dialogue focused on military-to-military relations was held in December 2025 in a capital city to India's east, where former military officers engaged in discussions to identify reasonable methods to prevent conflict escalation. Another dialogue was held in Muscat post-Operation Sindoor, while a format led by an Ottawa-based think tank was also held sometime last year. Previous editions of known Track 2 systems have focused on larger issues between India and Pakistan, including managing the line of control and other political matters. In one of the recent Dialogues held post Operation Sindoor, the fate of the Indus Water Treaty, for example, received minimal attention despite both New Delhi and Islamabad publicly sparring over India's move to hold the treaty in abeyance. Similarly, the priority and intensity of all other discussions outside of effective conflict management have receded since General Asim Munir's assumption of power over the Pakistani military, even if such issues may have been discussed as part of the larger agenda. An institution that was formally involved in India Pakistan Track 2 meetings suggests that Track 2s between India and Pakistan have become strongly context driven and play a very specific role in conflict management. One of the attendees explained how this mechanism works to the print. They pointed out that in the past, the Track 2 mechanism focused more objectively, which has changed in recent years. While the change in the formats may have impacted the larger successes of these dialogues, it allows New Delhi to gain certain perspectives into Islamabad's thinking, as formal diplomatic mechanisms remain in deep freeze. Findings from some of these dialogues are shared, for example, with India's national security officials, with delegations briefing senior government officials. Thank you for tuning in to The Print. Subscribe below for more such news and analysis.